Every journalist has one last great story in them. Mine began with my own death sentence. The neurological disorder had given me 6 months. That was 3 months ago. The drive to Eterna was a pilgrimage through Heaven's Gate, a desperate last hope. I guided my worn-out car along Highway 1, the cliffs of Big Sur plunging into an ocean that glittered with impossible blues. It was the kind of beauty that made you want to live forever, a feeling that had become a cruel clinical need for me. Eterna wasn't a hospital. It was a 5-star resort carved into the cliffside. The staff were all impossibly serene, their faces glowing with a uniform, radiant health. My wellness guide, a young woman named Lyra, spoke in a language of polished, New Age vagaries. "Here, we don't fight decay, Mr. Croft," she said, her smile never faltering. "We shed it. We help you embrace your purest, most vital form." But the journalist in me, the stubborn ghost that refused to die before my body did, was already taking notes. As a patient, I surrendered my phone, my laptop, my connection to the outside world. I was given the same simple white robes as all the other guests. In this place, the world's elite were stripped of their identities, becoming blank slates waiting for a miracle. For 2 days, I played the part, all while secretly documenting everything. A modified hearing aid recorded my conversations. A pinhole camera in my robe captured the layout of the facility. My instinct screamed that the story was here, but I had no proof. The breakthrough came on the 3rd night. I followed a staff member into a restricted, subterranean level of the facility under the pretext of a medical emergency. When the coast was clear, I picked the lock on a door not listed on any guest map. The room was cold, sterile, and meticulously organized. It smelled of ozone and bleach. It was a library of lost souls. Floor-to-ceiling shelves held hundreds of plain gray boxes, each labeled with a name and a date. I opened one at random. Marcus Thorne, 2024. Inside, a Patek Philippe watch, a set of car keys for a Bentley, and a wallet. I opened another. Isabella Rossi, 2023. A diamond wedding ring, a passport. It was a cemetery of identities. Eterna didn't just shed your sickness. It shed you. I had my proof, but I was a prisoner. My procedure was scheduled in 2 days. The dying patient in me craved the cure, but the journalist recoiled at its monstrous price. I realized I could only choose one. Back in my room, I hatched my final desperate plan. Using the facility's high-speed internal network, I built a data bomb. I compiled everything I had: audio, video, photos of the identity room, and a detailed manifesto of my investigation. I uploaded it to a series of encrypted offshore servers and set up a dead man's switch, an automated email programmed to send the entire package to every major news outlet in the world. The email would only be canceled if I entered a complex password every 24 hours. The next morning, Lyra came to my room. "It's time, Mr. Croft," she said, her serene smile unchanged. "Are you ready to be renewed?" I took one last look at the stunning ocean view. I was terrified, but I also felt a strange calm. My body might not survive this, but the journalist, the part of me that sought the truth, had just filed his last and greatest story. "Yes," I said, "I'm ready." They came for me at dawn. Lyra was there, her smile as serene and placid as ever. There was no gurney, no sterile hospital procedure. We simply walked to a room at the heart of Eterna, a chamber carved from the white rock of the cliffside itself. It was warm, and the air hummed with a low, resonant frequency. I lay down on a platform in the center of the room. "The vessel is just a vessel, Julian," Lyra whispered, her voice seeming to come from all directions at once. "Let go of it. Embrace what comes next." I felt a cool, shimmering liquid enter my veins from an IV. My last conscious thought was not of my family, not of my sickness, but of the data bomb I had armed. A final defiant act of a man who was about to cease to exist. Then, My world dissolved into light. I awoke to the sound of birdsong. For a moment, I didn't understand. The concept of waking up without a fog of pain and nausea was alien. I lay still, taking a mental inventory. The tremor in my hands was gone. The dull ache behind my eyes was gone. The leaden weight in my limbs that had been my constant companion for 2 years was gone. I sat up, not with the usual groan of effort, but with a smooth, fluid motion I hadn't possessed since my 20s. The room was bathed in the warm, golden light of a California morning. I walked to a full-length mirror and stared. The man looking back was me, but a version I only vaguely remembered. My skin was clear. My eyes were bright. The gray in my hair had vanished, replaced by its original dark brown. I looked healthy, vital. I raised my hand, and the reflection did the same. No tremor, no hesitation. A single genuine laugh escaped my lips. It was a miracle, a true and absolute miracle. The journalist, the cynic, the dying man, they had all died in that white room, and I was what was left. I was cured. Later that day, I met Cassian. He was the first host, the billionaire founder of Eterna. He wasn't the imposing, godlike figure I had imagined. He was a warm, charismatic man in his 50s who shook my hand with a firm, genuine grip. We walked through the gardens, the vibrant colors of the flowers almost overwhelming to my renewed senses. "Welcome to the family, Julian," he said, his voice resonating with a calm authority. "You feel it, don't you? The quiet, the peace, the absence of fear. That is the gift of Eterna. It's everything you promised," I admitted, still in awe of my own vitality. "The flaw of the old world was the singular I," Cassian explained, looking out at the endless ocean. "A consciousness trapped in a decaying vessel, ruled by fear and ego. Here, we are still ourselves, but we are also part of a greater whole. We have shed the burden of the self. You'll find your old ambitions, your old anxieties, they simply don't matter anymore. You are free to simply be." He was right. In the days that followed, I experienced a kind of peace I had never known. The drive to uncover, to expose, to fight, the core of my being as a journalist, had vanished. It felt like a fever that had finally broken. Why would I want to destroy this paradise? The memories of my investigation felt distant, like a story I had read about someone else, someone foolish and angry. My old life was a black and white film. This new one was in brilliant, vibrant color. I spent my days reading, walking the gardens, having deep philosophical conversations with the other renewed guests. We were a community of contented souls, a glimpse of a perfect, peaceful future for humanity. The ghost of the old Julian was almost gone, and then I saw him. I was on a terrace overlooking the main entrance when a new guest arrived. A man in his 60s, his face pale and etched with the unmistakable terror of a recent diagnosis. He walked with a cane, his body frail, but his eyes darted everywhere, filled with the same desperate hope and sharp, analytical fear that I remembered so well. He was me, a week ago. Seeing that raw, unprocessed humanity was like a key turning a rusted lock in my mind. A memory, sharp and unwelcome, pierced through the fog of my contentment. A cold room, boxes filled with watches and passports, a data bomb, armed and counting down. My blood ran cold, the dead man's switch. In my euphoric haze, I had completely forgotten. I looked at the digital clock on the terrace wall. I had been at Eterna for 10 days, 10 cycles. The data would be sent in less than 24 hours. The journalist wasn't dead after all, and he had just woken up inside the enemy's walls. The memory of the dead man's switch was a bucket of ice water to my new, serene soul. The peace I had been enjoying for 10 days was revealed for what it was, a beautiful gilded cage for my mind. The parasite, the symbiont, whatever it was, it wanted me calm. It wanted me compliant. The ghost of the old Julian, the dying journalist, wanted to burn this place to the ground. An internal war began. Before I could even think about finding my original body, I had to test the limits of my new consciousness. I went back to my room and stood before the mirror. I tried to summon my old anxieties. I thought about my looming deadline, about the news story, about the horror of this place. I tried to force an expression of panic, of fear. A strange thing happened. I could feel the chemical signals of anxiety begin in my brain, a faint, familiar fizzing. But then a wave of cool, placid calm washed over it, smoothing it out instantly. The symbiont was like an autocorrect for negative emotions. I could not feel fear, even when I knew I should be terrified. This was the first true horror. I was no longer in control of my own feelings. This wasn't a cure, it was a muzzle. That realization gave me the focus I needed. I had to see it. I had to see the room where they kept the originals. Using my status as a renewed, I had access to more of the facility. I spent the next few hours exploring, projecting an air of blissful curiosity, all while mapping the restricted zones in my head. I found it behind a door marked geothermal maintenance, a sector that required a higher level of security clearance. I waited for a shift change, and in the brief window, when the corridor was empty, I used a small device I'd scavenged from a toolkit to bypass the electronic lock. The air on the other side was cold, and the smell of ozone and antiseptic returned. This was the clinical underbelly beneath the spa's serene facade. I moved through silent white corridors until I found a large circular chamber sealed by a heavy vault door. The battery room. I overrode the lock and the door hissed open. The sight within was a pristine, orderly nightmare. Hundreds of translucent cryotanks stood in perfect, concentric circles, glowing with a soft blue light. Inside each tank, a human body floated in a clear nutrient gel, connected by a web of tubes and wires to a central humming core. They were the originals. Old, sick, decaying husks, their faces slack, their eyes closed. They were the forgotten vessels, the batteries powering the paradise upstairs. I walked through the silent rows, the names of some of the world's most famous people on small digital plaques beneath their tanks. And then I found him, me, the original Julian Croft. He was emaciated, his skin pale, his body still ravaged by the disease I could no longer feel. He was a grotesque puppet, and I was the beautiful doll. As I stared at my own dying face, his eyes fluttered open. For a single horrifying second, they focused on me. There was no recognition, only a flicker of pure, unadulterated agony. And then they closed again. He was still in there. Some part of him was still conscious, trapped inside a prison of flesh, while I, the copy, walked free. The horror of it was so absolute that it almost broke through the symbiont's chemical peace. I felt a surge of something, rage, grief, before the cool, placid wave washed over me again, leaving me calm, but now with a core of cold, diamond-hard fury. It is a shocking sight, isn't it? I spun around. Kazian stood in the open doorway, flanked by two imposing guards. He wasn't angry. He looked at me with an expression of paternal understanding. "I must admit, Julian, you are a remarkable specimen," he said, walking slowly into the chamber. "The symbiont has taken to you, but it has not erased you. Your old self is still fighting. That journalistic curiosity, it is a powerful drive." "You're murderers," I said, my voice eerily calm because my own mind wouldn't allow me to shout. "Are we?" Kazian gestured to the tanks. "We are preserving them. We have ended their suffering, and in their place, we have given you a second chance. A perfect life, free of pain and fear. We are not murderers. We are saviors. He walked until he stood beside me, both of us looking at the dying man in the tank. I know all about your data bomb, he said casually. We have been monitoring your network activity. A very clever plan. The old Julian was a formidable man. He then turned to face me, his eyes sincere. That is why I am here. Your old self is a threat, a ghost that must be exorcised. But your mind, your skills, they are an asset. The collective is peaceful, but it is not yet wise. It needs guidance. It needs storytellers, investigators, thinkers. It needs you. He led me out of the chamber and into a small private office. On a desk in the center of the room sat a single computer terminal. This terminal can send a cancellation signal to your dead man's switch, Cation explained. You have a choice. You can let the timer run out. Your story will be released. The world will be plunged into chaos, and this sanctuary will be destroyed. You will die with it, your perfect new body annihilated. He paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. Or, you can cancel the transmission, embrace your new life, and I will give you a place in my inner circle. You will not just be a guest here. You will be a shepherd. You will help me guide the collective to shape the future of this new world. You will have a purpose again, a real one. But the old Julian, the journalist, must die by your own hand. He left me alone in the room. On the screen of the terminal, a single button glowed. Cancel transmission. Through the window, I could see the sun beginning to set over the Pacific. The clock was ticking. The ghost inside me was screaming, and the calm, rational voice of the parasite was whispering that Cation was right. I stood alone in the quiet office, the fate of the world distilled into a single glowing button on a screen. Cancel transmission. The silence was louder than any alarm. It was filled with a war inside my own head. The voice of the symbiont, the part of me that was now Eterna, was a seductive whisper. It showed me a future of endless, sun-drenched days, free of pain. It showed me a world without conflict, a humanity united in a single benevolent consciousness, guided by wise shepherds like Cassian, and soon me. It told me the old Julian's obsession with truth was a symptom of his sickness, the final, desperate grasping of a singular ego facing its own extinction. Let it go, it whispered. Embrace the peace. You've earned it. You are cured. But the ghost of the man I used to be fought back. It showed me the face of my daughter, Lily, in the hospital bed, her life stolen by a disease. It reminded me of the fire in my gut when I chased a story, the fundamental belief that people deserve to know, that a comfortable lie was the most dangerous prison of all. It was the core of who I had been. My last story wasn't just about Eterna. It was my final report, my last act of defiance against the silence. To press the button would be to kill the last true part of myself. To let the timer run out would mean the destruction of this paradise and most likely my own new, perfect body. Both were a kind of death. I stared at the timer on the screen, 3 hours remaining. A third option, a gambit born of both the cold logic of the symbiont and the reckless spirit of the journalist, began to form. Kazian had said he wanted my mind as an asset. He wanted me to help guide the collective. Very well. A true leader isn't forged in paradise. They are forged in crisis. I sat down at the terminal, but I didn't press the button. I waited. The final hour was the longest of my 2 lives. The symbiont's whispers became frantic, desperate. The ghost of my past sat in quiet, resolute judgment. With 1 second left on the clock, a new message flashed on the screen. Transmission sent. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the entire facility erupted in a cacophony of alarms. Red lights bathed the serene white corridors in a bloody glow. The door to the office burst open. Cassian stood there, his face no longer a mask of calm authority, but of pure, unrestrained fury. "What have you done?" he roared. I stood up from the terminal, feeling a strange sense of calm that was all my own. It wasn't the placid serenity of the parasite. It was the calm of a man who had finally made a choice. "You offered me a job," I said. "You told me the collective needed guidance. I've just given it its first great challenge, survival. A world of 8 billion dying, desperate people now knows that a cure for death exists and that you have been hiding it. Your paradise is over, Cassian. The real work begins now. Let's see how wise your new world truly is." Months later, the world was in chaos. The story, my story, had shattered the fragile peace of the post-silence era. The gates of Eterna were besieged, not by armies, but by a desperate flood of humanity. The sick, the dying, the merely curious, all clamoring for the miracle. Governments collapsed under the pressure. New cults formed, worshipping the Eterna symbiote. The world I had known and the quiet, brutal peace that had followed were both gone, replaced by a new, frantic age of desperate hope. And I was at the center of it. I had been cured. I was immortal, healthy, and powerful. As promised, Cassian had given me a place in his inner circle. My journalistic skills were now used not to expose truths, but to manage them. My days were spent in strategy rooms, crafting press releases for a world that wasn't supposed to know we existed, managing the logistics of a secret that was now screaming from every headline. I had won. The story got out. The ghost of the old Julian had triumphed. But I, the survivor, was now a prisoner in the aftermath. My new eternal life was not one of peace, but one of unending crisis management. I had escaped my terminal illness only to be diagnosed with a new, incurable condition. The consequences of my own final act. I had my cure, but I had lost my soul, proving that the journalist inside me had always been the more terminal disease.